So welcome to the first edition of Making Sense for February 2026. And boy, there's a lot to make sense of this month so far. We're only, a few days in. We're going to talk about a super clumsy, and I'm happy to admit this, a super clumsy, I had to rehearse this, an Afreximbank. It sounds like something you take for an over-the-counter medication when you get the flu, but we'll get to that in a moment. Why do we care about them? We'll get to that. Then AGOA. Does Trump love us? I'm wondering, because he signed AGOA, but then we still have the Trump tariffs, which we'll get to, which leads me nicely, Francis Hurd, to what has Donald Trump done this week for us?
So Donald Trump, I think, woke up on the right side of the bed yesterday, and he's actually in a very peaceful mood, and a lot of good things from an investor perspective are happening globally, because Trump and Iran will have talks tomorrow in Oman. And he had a call with Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, yesterday, and they said it was pretty positive. Well, Trump is saying it's positive. There's talk of China buying US soybeans. Now, that's great for the world, but not good for us. And the JSE is actually having a terrible day as a result. Let me tell you why.
It's been a while since you've said that.
Yeah, the JSE is usually on form, right? It's having an off day. And the reason is because the dollar has risen. So the rand has weakened. So the dollar possibly reacting to that easing of geopolitical tensions is the phrase that's being used, because remember, a lot of the stress has been about Iran and about trade tensions, right? So that's easing. So the dollar looking good. Suddenly gold is not in vogue. Gold is falling. That's weighing on our miners. That's weighing on the JSE. So all the bad news that was actually good for our market has reversed. So I don't know if we should thank or not thank Donald Trump this week.
I think we should just be grateful he woke up on the right side of the right bed on one particular day. So that's what Donald Trump has done for us. Can we talk about what I would say from a PR perspective, from an optics perspective, has to be one of the more clumsy, and I don't have a solution for it, to be fair, I don't have a solution, one of the more clumsy contractions, acronyms of a name. I wasn't sure what I was reading when I read this the first time a few days ago. Afreximbank.
I know.
So it is Africa Export Import Bank. So somebody very, very clever got paid a lot of money to go, how do we make this better? And what we decided to do, I'll tell you how they did this.
Maybe they didn't get paid any money.
Maybe it was a free.
There was no ad agency involved.
Maybe there was a freebie, because here's what they did. They took Africa Export Import Bank. Stay with me. Africa, we took out most of it, we just kept AF. Export, we took out most of it, we kept EX. Import, we took out most of it, we kept IM, and we like bank. So it has got to be one of the strangest acronyms ever. But it got me wondering, beyond the lack of PR, we, as South Africa, we like them. They're giving us money. We're lending money. We love them. So it is a story of yay, and it is a story of woe. Story of yay, Francis, I'm glad you asked, is they're lending South Africa money. We like that. The story of woe is Fitch and Afreximbank aren't friends.
Yes. So Afreximbank, even the president stumbled over that. I think I'm saying it correctly. I'm not even sure.
I'm not even sure how you say it. I think it's how you say it.
Afreximbank, and it's part of the African Development Bank. It's got this interesting history. I think it was 1993 it began. So this was African countries coming together to set up a lending institution. So they all put money in as shareholders, and then this bank could support trade across the African continent. So it could lend to governments for infrastructure that could better trade. And so I'm just painting this picture because trade amongst African countries is a good thing. And it was said, and this is still true in some cases, this old adage that sometimes it's cheaper to send your goods to London than to send goods from South Africa up into the African continent.
Because, to send to London and then bring it back down.
Because, and you can even go back to colonialism, which kind of set up markets to feed Europe. So African markets like the roads, if you think of the roads and then the ports, and everything was easy to get goods off the African continent, not to keep goods on the African continent.
Wow.
So this is a big thing. And remember when Trump started slapping everybody with tariffs, look, it's good that we're a shareholder now. We're a Class A shareholder. That means we actually have to contribute, as I understand, to this bank. And I haven't seen anything about how much we will contribute or have contributed in the past.
We're paying to play.
Yeah, you pay, but then you also lend at preferential rates once you're a full shareholder like South Africa. And we do want to borrow at good interest rates.
Yes.
So if these are good interest rates, then that is the good part of it. Yeah.
And you took me straight to my next question, because the little bit I've learned from you on this podcast and listening to you and Akash, excuse me, is credit ratings. They're important. Whether it's Fitch or S&P or Moody's, these credit ratings matter, because in the end, that is going to determine how either a bank or a country is able to borrow money. And the fact that we have Fitch and we have Afreximbank having a bit of a tiff, and we're lending money, does that not put us on the back foot? We're lending money from a bank that is not in good favor with one of the big financial ratings agencies. Does that mean we're paying more for the money we're lending just because we're buddy-buddy?
This is an interesting question, and I don't have a full answer for you because, in fact, the response to this has been quite muted. There doesn't seem to be huge alarm around Fitch, and obviously government and everybody involved in industrial policy in this country saying this is good because the money will be used for good things. Now, there's a history. The global ratings agencies are important, or mostly the American rating agencies are important, because it helps your borrowing costs come down if you get a good rating from Fitch and S&P and Moody's. We are in junk status, remember, and there's been huge alarm around that as a country. Not everybody rates those rating agencies, if that makes sense, because those investments in property that landed up causing the financial crisis were AAA rated. Many find it problematic that companies have to pay these rating agencies to give them ratings. So we still take them seriously, because despite the need for an alternative or Africans saying we need our own rating agencies, these are still the big players on the global market that affect our interest rates on the global market. Now, maybe it's not as important because here we have an African funded bank, right, that is not looking at ratings when it lends, and we are not looking at Fitch's rating when we borrow. So maybe this is sort of separate from the global investment system, and that's why it can be okay, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it's interesting if you take a look at, I want to ask numbers in a moment, Francis, just what we're lending from Afreximbank. And now I finally say it without looking at my notes here. Afreximbank, they strongly disagreed with how Fitch were downgrading this because, and I like this, they were unhappy with the misunderstanding of how Afreximbank operates and its legal protections in its founding treaty. So basically the bank is saying, we know what Fitch is and we appreciate you rating us, but we don't agree with how you're rating us, because you don't understand us. You don't understand me. You don't understand how I work.
Yes. And Fitch doesn't, let me say this carefully. Even Trevor Manuel, who I spoke to recently, said ratings of African governments and African industries are questionable because those global rating agencies don't always understand what they're rating. And sometimes it does actually look unfair. It looks like African countries that are equivalent to a country in Europe, very similar economy or size and similar protections, will get a lower rating. So this is partly Africa's problem because investors don't always have the information that they need to come in, and maybe their investment ratings agencies don't also. So that's a dispute. That's hard to tell. But what I can say clearly is that on the African continent, there's concern about those rating agencies. And there doesn't seem to be too much alarm about South Africa lending from
there doesn't actually. It was the president arrived. He was there during the announcement. Everyone seems to be quite happy.
No opposition parties even mentioned.
I was about to say, no one actually came in with any media statements late at night that you and I had to pick up on. But what is undisputable is the amount of money that Afreximbank is essentially borrowing South Africa. I mean, can we just remind everyone the ginormity of the amount we're talking here, and what is it for?
Yeah, it is big. So we lent $1.5 billion from the IMF last year, and there was a lot of talk about that. This is $8 billion or 127 billion rand.
Sure.
So that's not to be sniffed at. And government has explained this will support national industrial policy. It's a bit of jargon, but you've heard that word beneficiation. And we want more factories. We want more industry in South Africa, building things and doing things, and jewelry makers using the platinum and gold to make things that then sell for high value. So it's going to help beneficiation, decarbonization. Basically, there's a concern that South Africa is deindustrializing, like America, like many countries, because the imports are coming in from China and we're not competing. So it's going to help South African companies compete and then trade on the African continent. There is a question mark. We were saying there's been no negative coverage. There are concerns about the transformation fund, which government is setting up. And the idea is that eventually, what government would want is that companies would even give this transformation fund money, and it would fund black businesses. Maybe it even becomes a route to avoid going through some BEE hurdles. You rather donate to the transformation fund. This part of this money will go to the transformation fund. And I do know some business industry leaders are concerned about the transformation fund. Why? Because in South Africa, as soon as you have a big pot of money being administered centrally or by a government department, we've seen corruption in the past. So there is a question mark about the transformation fund and how that money will be used.
And we're going to obviously stay on top of how that money will be used. Francis and the team will keep looking at that. I want to end this edition of Making Sense on AGOA and Trump tariffs, because if you had gone back just a few weeks, at least for me, the layperson, when it comes to the world of global politics and economy. Not too long ago, Donald Trump hit us with a bunch of Trump tariffs. There seem to be new ones every week. And then maybe again, the right side of the right bed, Donald Trump decides, well, let's sign AGOA. It's okay. But I don't understand. So we've now got a new AGOA agreement, but we still have the Trump tariffs. So I'm wondering, are we gaining as South Africa, or are we still losing, even though AGOA has come back in?
We both, because AGOA gives African countries preferential access to the US market. Now, that used to mean that a whole lot of South African companies could sell to the US market with zero duties, which really makes them super competitive when they go into America and they're competing against other companies coming in with their goods that have tariffs. So AGOA used to be wonderful. The Trump tariffs basically wiped out that, right? Because then Trump says, okay, 30%. He also said 25% for car makers. And an expert explained to me today, that has been different because at least the 25% is across the board for all car manufacturers in the world. So they're all on a level playing field going into the US market. The 30%, no, that was really nasty against South Africa. Now, if AGOA had fallen away, it was basically in limbo, and then there was discussion, is South Africa going to be included or not? Yeah, somehow we were included and Trump signed it. Maybe that's a fight for another day for him. I'm not sure, although some of our goods are valuable as well in the US market. He signed it for a year, so it's not long enough. But if it had fallen away or we had been excluded, we would have had 30% plus the tariffs that AGOA was protecting us from.
Okay.
Yeah. So sorry, that's a long way to get to where we would be.
No, but it's an important way to understand how the two would tie in.
There has been a lot of confusion.
Yes.
So we would have reverted to, it's called the most favored nation tariffs. And those are between 2.5% and 4.5%, averaging 3.5%. So It's not as bad as 30%, and the 30% is still disastrous. At least there are exemptions, but there are many companies exporting goods that face that. Mercedes-Benz is one of the big car makers, facing the 25%. But yeah, it would go from 30% to 33.5%.
Sure.
Generally. So yeah, it's helping us.
It is helping.
It is helping. It's something because these exporters need something. I've really been trying to find out who's been hard hit by AGOA, because depending on who you speak to, AGOA, the Trump tariffs and the potential loss of AGOA has been disastrous. Others say it hasn't been that serious, mostly because of the exemptions. So a lot of our metals, the commodities boom that we've been talking about, benefit. But wine, not so much.
Yeah, I was about to say that there's still that wine issue, and we can talk about French champagne another time as we did a few weeks ago. All right, so that's the best that I can do as far as making sense of it. I'm sure it's the questions you had as well. What is not making sense to you? Maybe part of this discussion Francis and I had. Let us know. Nothing making sense. It's why we're here. It's why we're here. Talk to us. Anything else not making sense? On X, it is at ENCA. On Facebook, on Instagram, it is at ENCA News. Hope that made sense. It made sense to me, Francis, as always. Thank you very much. We'll look out for the comments, and we're back with you again next week on Making Sense.